Welcome in. Today we are looking at a modern geopolitical paradox.
A really massive one.
Yeah, a strategic alliance driving billions of dollars, shaping global headlines, and it's built entirely between two groups who hold deeply, literally opposing views on how the world will end.
Right.
And to understand the political landscape of today, for you as the learner tuning in, we have to pull the thread all the way back to the ancient Persian Empire. We are taking a close look at one of the most historically significant and complex religious relationships in world history, the relationship between Judaism and Christianity.
Okay.
Let's unpack this.
But before we step into the timeline, I actually need to speak directly to you, the listener, about the nature of the sources we're analyzing today.
Yeah, this is important.
Because this deep dive touches on highly politically charged content. Specifically, we'll be discussing American Christian nationalist movements, evangelicalism, and the modern state of Israel. So it is absolutely critical to state right at the top that neither of us is taking any political sides here.
Right.
We are not approaching this from a left-wing perspective, nor a right-wing perspective. We are strictly remaining impartial. Our goal is not to endorse or condemn any of the political or religious viewpoints we discuss.
Exactly.
We're simply here to convey, analyze, and help you understand the historical, theological, and political ideas contained in the original source material.
Right, just laying out the facts of the text. So with that framework in place, let's rewind the clock to the ancient world. Our sources start us off between 539 and 32 BCE. This is what we could call the Persian plot twist in ancient theology.
It really is a plot twist.
Because after the Babylonian exile, the Persian king Cyrus the Great allowed Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem. But that meant for centuries, Jewish communities were living under the rule of the Achaemenid Empire.
Which was just an absolute superpower at the time. I mean, the Achaemenid Empire stretched from the Indus Valley all the way to Egypt. It had incredibly advanced infrastructure.
Yeah.
Roads, postal systems, standardized weights and measures. You had Jewish merchants, scribes, and tradespeople fully integrated into this sweeping global economy.
Wow.
And the dominant religion of that vast empire was Zoroastrianism, founded by the prophet Zoroaster.
So our sources bring up a really interesting academic debate here, something called the mixed interaction theory, because when you have Jewish communities living inside a Persian empire for centuries,
Yeah.
the obvious question is whether Judaism just copied Persian religious concepts.
And the historical consensus is a firm no. It wasn't a simple copy-paste job.
Okay.
That is where the mixed interaction theory comes in. It suggests that when two distinct cultures interact daily, trading in the same market, serving in the same administrative courts.
They rub off on each other.
Exactly. Ideas begin to undergo a sort of cultural osmosis. Right. The exchange of ideas during this period helped to sharpen and crystallize concepts that were already present in early Jewish thought. So Judaism developed entirely on its own, but its exposure to Persian culture acted like a catalyst.
I'd love to look at how that osmosis actually worked on the ground, because the sources point to 4 distinct shifts in Jewish and eventually Christian thought that crystallized during this Persian era. The first one is a structural shift toward cosmic dualism. From what I understand of early Israelite religion, the focus was mostly on the covenant between the people and their God, Yahweh.
Right.
Evil wasn't really framed as a rival cosmic force.
No, it wasn't. In the oldest texts, hardship or evil was generally understood as human disobedience or direct divine punishment. But what's fascinating here is how that framework evolves under Persian rule.
Okay.
In Zoroastrian theology, the entire universe is structured around a profound, literal conflict. On one side, you have Ahura Mazda, the supreme creator and force of truth. On the other, you have Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit of chaos.
So it's good versus evil.
Very explicitly. And under centuries of Persian influence, we start to see this moral dualism emerge in Jewish apocalyptic thinking. The universe begins to be described as a cosmic battlefield between divine light and demonic darkness.
That's a huge shift. And I mean, if the universe is suddenly a battlefield, you need soldiers for that war, right?
You do.
Is that why we start seeing a change in how angels and demons are described? Because that is the second major shift our sources identify.
Precisely. If you read the earliest parts of the Hebrew Bible, angels certainly appear, but they're relatively simple. They're mostly unnamed messengers.
Like they just pop in, deliver a message, and leave.
Right. But in later texts written after the Persian period, like the Book of Daniel and the apocryphal Book of Enoch, the spiritual realm gets a sweeping organizational chart.
An organizational chart. I love that.
It's true, though. Angels are given specific names, like Michael and Gabriel. The Book of Enoch provides incredibly vivid descriptions of this. It describes thousands upon thousands of angels, rivers of fire, and specific ranks of watchers who observe humanity.
It sounds like a bureaucracy.
It looks very much like the structured bureaucracy of a Persian royal court, but
Yeah.
projected into the heavens.
And what about the other side of that battlefield?
We see the emergence of a much more defined adversary figure. Evil spirits are described as organized forces actively opposing God, led by a figure that comes to be known as Satan.
Wow.
Historians see strong structural parallels here with Zoroastrian ideas about organized spiritual beings aligned with either the forces of good or the forces of evil.
That brings us to the third shift, which has to do with what happens after we die. Early on, the concept of the afterlife seems quite vague. There's a term used, Sheol. What exactly was that?
Sheol was essentially an underworld, a shadowy neutral pit where everyone went after death. Kings, peasants, the righteous, the wicked, they all shared the same quiet, dim fate.
Just a waiting room, basically. But the later texts show a dramatic pivot toward resurrection and final judgment.
Yes, and the Book of Daniel is a perfect example of this. You begin to see writings expecting a dramatic future event where the dead will literally wake up. There'll be a final judgment resulting in a clear division.
Good and bad.
Exactly. Some will rise to everlasting life, and others to everlasting shame. This mirrors Zoroastrian tradition almost perfectly, which also anticipated a future bodily resurrection, a final cosmic judgment, and an ultimate purification of the physical world.
Which leads right into the fourth and final shift, the idea of a future savior to actually bring about that renewal.
Right. In Zoroastrian tradition, there's a prominent figure called the Saoshyant. This is a prophesied future savior who defeats evil and completely renews the world.
Okay.
Right around this same time, we see the Jewish concept of the Mashiach, the Messiah, evolving. Originally, the word just meant anointed one. It was a practical term for a human king or a high priest who had literal oil poured on their head.
Just a job title.
Yes.
Yeah.
But over centuries, it transforms into a grand prophetic hope for a future ultimate leader who will restore perfect justice.
And later on, Christianity identifies that specific messianic role with Jesus.
Exactly. It's incredible to see how religions do not exist in a vacuum. They evolve through the daily realities of the people practicing them.
I want you, as the listener, to think about how wild this is. The basic structure of the afterlife, the concept of spiritual warfare, the hierarchy of angels, concepts that billions of people hold as core truths today were shaped by ancient empires trading ideas in Persian marketplaces millennia ago.
It really reframes how you look at history.
It does. Which brings us to the next major turning point in our outline. We are fast-forwarding to the 1st century of the Common Era. We are looking at the fundamental theological roadblock that caused the ultimate split between Judaism and Christianity, the identity of the Messiah.
This is the central divide.
Right.
Christianity emerged directly from Jewish traditions, but the two diverge sharply right here.
Right.
Christians believe Jesus fulfilled the messianic prophecies of the Hebrew Scriptures.
Right.
Judaism does not accept this interpretation, and their rejection is based on very specific, concrete expectations found in those same ancient texts.
The sources use an analogy here that I find really helpful. It frames Jewish theology as having a very specific set of KPIs, key performance indicators for the Messiah.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, these are observable historical metrics laid out by prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And the first major KPI revolves around his identity.
Right. In traditional Jewish belief, the Messiah must be a fully human leader. He is expected to be a direct descendant of King David, part of a verifiable historical royal line.
Human being, the key word there.
Yes. Judaism maintains an absolute, uncompromising commitment to strict monotheism. Because of this, it completely rejects the Christian idea of divine incarnation. The concept of a divine human figure, or a trinity where God becomes flesh, is viewed as entirely incompatible with Jewish theology.
So he must be human, and he must be from the line of David. Then there are the observable task KPIs. The Messiah has a literal job description.
He does.
He has to gather the Jewish people from exile and restore them to their homeland. He has to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, and he has to establish literal, historical, universal peace. Is that where that famous phrase comes from? The one about beating swords into plowshares?
Yes. That is from the prophet Isaiah chapter 2. It's a vision of a world where nations literally beat their weapons into farming tools and war ceases entirely.
Wow.
Not just an internal spiritual peace in your heart, but global geopolitical peace. This is the ultimate litmus test for Judaism.
And evaluating Jesus against that specific checklist is why the two faiths split.
Exactly. During the life of Jesus, Rome still brutally occupied Judea.
Hmm.
The Jewish people were not gathered from exile. In fact, the Roman occupation was suffocating them.
Right. Things were getting worse?
The temple wasn't rebuilt either. It was actually destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE, just decades after Jesus' death. And universal world peace certainly did not happen. From the Jewish perspective, the historical checklist simply was not completed.
So how did early Christians respond to that? I mean, they were living in the same historical reality. They knew Rome was still in charge.
To understand the Christian pivot, you have to understand the historical trauma of the Roman occupation. The crucifixion was a definitive public state execution meant to humiliate political rivals. For the followers of Jesus, this presented immense cognitive dissonance. Their response was a profound theological shift. Christianity began to interpret the prophecies spiritually. They concluded that Jesus achieved a cosmic victory over sin and death, rather than a political victory over Rome.
But what about the physical checklist? The world peace, the gathering of exiles.
The Christian explanation became the concept of the second coming. Jesus achieved the spiritual victory in the first century, and he will return in the future to complete the historical, political tasks.
How did Jewish scholars react to the idea of a two-part mission?
Judaism firmly rejects the concept. The Hebrew Bible does not mention the Messiah coming twice. The expectation is that the mission is political, national, and completed entirely during the Messiah's single human lifetime.
So it's a strict disagreement over textual interpretation. The sources note that Jews rely on the Hebrew Bible and interpretive traditions like the Talmud. Can you explain what the Talmud represents in this context?
The Talmud is essentially centuries of vibrant, recorded debates between rabbis on how to interpret and live out the law. It is the cornerstone of Jewish religious life. So relying on the Hebrew Bible and the Talmud, Jewish theology evaluates the claims of the New Testament and rejects them.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's important to emphasize that this is a doctrinal dispute. While history has seen periods of intense conflict and persecution, the core of the theological split is about two entirely different understandings of what the messianic job description actually is.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We have traced this from ancient Persia through the trauma of the Roman occupation, and now we are bringing the timeline right up to the present day.
Yes.
Because in modern politics, an incredibly paradoxical dynamic has emerged between these two groups. We are looking at the alliance between certain segments of American Christian nationalists and evangelical movements and the modern state of Israel.
It's a fascinating modern development, and to understand it, we have to look at the theology driving the political support. This perspective is often referred to as Christian Zionism.
Right.
Many evangelical Christians interpret biblical prophecy, specifically Christian readings of texts like the Book of Revelation, through a framework known as dispensationalism.
I've heard that term before, but how does dispensationalism actually work when it comes to viewing the modern Middle East?
Dispensationalism is a theological framework that divides history into distinct eras, or dispensations. In this view, many evangelicals believe that the physical return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is the ticking clock for the final era.
Like a countdown.
Exactly. It's a mandatory prerequisite for an end-time scenario. According to these interpretations, this gathering in Israel will ultimately lead to an apocalyptic conflict. And the culmination of that conflict, in their view, is a moment where they believe Jews will finally recognize Jesus as the Messiah.
That is a staggering paradox. You have American Christian groups providing immense tangible support. They are funding massive Washington lobbying groups to influence U.S. foreign policy. They're sending millions of dollars directly to communities and settlements. They are driving the Israeli economy through huge influxes of religious tourism and pilgrimage. And they are doing all of this based on a theological endgame, an apocalyptic conversion scenario that Judaism completely and utterly rejects.
It's a profound contradiction. You have a powerful political alliance built on entirely incompatible religious doctrines.
So why does Israel embrace this alliance? If the evangelical endgame is so opposed to Jewish belief, why accept the lobbying and the funding?
Because the modern state of Israel operates from a perspective of realpolitik.
Realpolitik.
Realpolitik is practical, interest-based politics. It prioritizes national security and tangible outcomes over ideological purity.
Yeah.
Israeli leadership oversees a very diverse society made up of religious Jews, secular Jews, Muslims, and Christians.
Right.
The state itself operates in a highly volatile region, meaning it requires strong alliances, based on national and economic survival.
Yeah.
From their perspective, the support from American Christian groups is incredibly valuable in the here and now.
It's practical.
Highly practical. It strengthens essential diplomatic ties, it boosts the economy, and, critically, it helps secure immense, reliable political backing from the United States government.
So it's pure pragmatism. They might completely disagree on what happens at the end of the world, but today, in the current geopolitical reality, they have aligned strategic interests.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, our source material summarizes this modern relationship into three distinct layers for you.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, theology. Judaism and Christianity remain deeply divided over the identity of Jesus and the very nature of the Messiah. Second, prophecy. They have completely different, incompatible interpretations of biblical end times. And third, politics. A strategic, pragmatic alliance has formed despite those doctrinal differences, driven by mutual geopolitical interests.
So what does this all mean? What this means for you listening is that trying to understand modern geopolitical alliances like the deeply intertwined U.S.-Israel relationship is quite literally impossible if you only look at today's headlines.
You really have to zoom out.
You have to trace the thread all the way back. You have to understand a first-century trauma under Roman rule that split the definition of a Messiah. And you even have to understand how ancient empires trading ideas about cosmic dualism in Persian marketplaces shape the way billions of people view the world today. The headlines of tomorrow are being written by the theology of the past.
They absolutely are. And this raises an important question that I want to leave you with today.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time discussing the mixed interaction theory. The idea that the physical political borders of the ancient Persian Empire forced diverse cultures together, and that proximity catalyzed the spiritual concepts of angels, demons, and the afterlife that so many hold today.
Right.
So think about our world now. If ancient political borders could do that, how might our modern hyper-connected political alliances in our digital borderless world be quietly mutating the religious expectations of tomorrow? What new theological shifts are being born right now out of our modern strategic alliances?
That is an incredible thought to end on and something to keep an eye out for as we watch these alliances shift. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We love unpacking these complex threads with you. Keep questioning, keep digging into the history behind the headlines, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.